Good morning, Samford, and welcome for another installment of our series of For the Good convocations, in which I attempt to interview people in the Birmingham area and beyond who are for the good in all aspects of their lives. This series is sponsored by our Mann Center for Ethics and Leadership. And today we have as our special guest Judge Karon Bowdre, who is federal district judge and former chief judge for the Northern District of Alabama. Judge Bowdre, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for asking me.
Well, we want to get right to the questions, and I've got several for you, and I might throw you a curveball or two as we work our way through, but we've been friends for a long time.
I would expect it from you.
Okay. First, help us to understand a little bit more about you, to get to know you. And specifically, let's start with your childhood and your background and early influences in your life. And I especially like to ask about challenges and opportunities because we certainly learn a lot through the challenges. And all of those things on growing up. And so in short, take us up to the time that you chose Samford as an undergraduate, and talk as long as you want because we got plenty of time.
Well, to go up to the time when I chose Samford would only take me to about age 10. I grew up in Montgomery, Alabama, and when I was about 10 years old, my father left my mother and my much younger sister and me. And that was a very critical time, of course, in my life. But my mother has always been the most influential person in my life. She had always dreamed of going to Howard University, but when she graduated from high school, there just was no money. So she went to work. But she, early on, introduced me to Samford University. Whenever we would come up to Birmingham for whatever, we would come up Old Highway 31, and it was always a great game. Who can see Samford first? And so I always made sure. Then it was the two-lane road. Okay, I'm really dating myself. But you could actually see it from both coming up from the south going north and from north going south. So I always made sure that I sat on the correct side of the car so that I could see Samford. I honestly never applied to any other school. I had no desire to go to any other school. But finances were going to be a real problem. So I knew that if I couldn't get the money, I could go to Auburn University in Montgomery. But I did not want to stay in Montgomery, and as an Alabama fan, I didn't want to go to anything associated with Auburn.
You just created a whole lot of controversy in what you just said, but go right ahead.
I'm used to controversy. But anyway, it was a real matter of prayer. Mother very much wanted me to go to Samford, and I very much wanted to go there. And I worked every summer beginning in 9th grade as a lifeguard at the YMCA. Didn't make a whole lot of money, but I put away what I did make. And I think it lasted me about a semester at Samford. But anyway, Mother did what she could, but as a single mother, she didn't have a lot of opportunities. Fortunately, there were a lot of good people that went before me to Samford who made arrangements for scholarships. And Tom Cleveland was instrumental in cobbling together enough money for me so that I could go to Samford. And I also worked while on campus in the English department, and that gave me enough money to pay for my sorority. But I will be forever indebted to the Beeson brothers. I was a beneficiary of a Beeson scholarship as well as several others. So that was getting me into Samford, but like I said, I decided when I was about 10 years old that I was going to go to Samford.
You know, your reference to Tom Cleveland, and I think the quote was that he managed to cobble up enough to make it possible. Knowing Dr. Cleveland well, and also having had conversations with hundreds and maybe thousands of Samford grads over the years, about Tom Cleveland and his influence, I'm guessing that there would be at least hundreds of people who would say the same thing, that somehow Tom Cleveland cobbled up enough money to make it happen. Great memories from all of that. We're now to your time at Samford and then Cumberland. So you had an extended time here on the Homewood campus. Talk with us about your memories then of Samford and of Cumberland, and I'd especially be interested in hearing about members of the faculty and staff. We've already referred to Tom Cleveland, but others that may have had significant influence and impact on your life.
One person who had so much influence on my life that I could fill up the whole time talking about is Dr. Sigurd Bryan in the religion department. I came to Samford believing that God wanted me in some kind of mission field. And so I majored in religion, which I just thoroughly enjoyed, delving into theology and the Bible and better understanding the faith that my mother had passed along to me and making it my own. And Dr. Bryan was very instrumental in that. I took every class I could take from him, and I loved that he began every class with prayer. And his prayers were such communion with God that you just felt like you were in the presence of the Lord when Dr. Bryan prayed. And I would say he's probably one of the most godly men I've ever known. So he was very influential in my intellectual development of my Christian faith. Another person who was very influential to me here at Samford was Martha Ann Cox, who at the time I think was Dean of Women. I was on the Panhellenic committee or whatever it was called then, and she was our head, and we traveled together some, and she was just a wonderful, wonderful woman and great inspiration. I could go on. There were so many others. Dr. Lindy Martin, who was Dean of Students or something like that, and he was kind of the liaison for the student government, and I got to know him through that. Just many more people.
I'm really not surprised by any of those, because you're mentioning people that in Samford's more recent history have been among the most student-centered members of our faculty and staff. All delightful folks, and all now in glory. You have a special attachment from your Samford days to the word graffiti, Judge Bowdre. So fill us in. What is that connection with you?
Graffiti is actually a ministry and a church that's based in New York City. But in 1975, a group of 19 Samford students who were on a Jan term project spent a week in Manhattan, the Lower East Side of Manhattan, which at that time was drug-infested, rat-infested. It was just a hole that you didn't want to go to. My good mother was very concerned about her daughter going off to New York City, but she eventually got used to that. But it was a group that was put together by Esther Burroughs, who was, I'm not sure she was called campus minister at that time because she was a female, and I'm not sure that would have worked, but whatever her title was, we had a 2-week class that she and Dr. Edwards led that prepared us for inner city ministry. We then went to, like I said, the Lower East Side of Manhattan and began the renovation of a storefront building that would then be used as an outreach center. We tore out the walls and the floors and the ceiling, and in the process I for the first time saw a little white substance in baggies, and wasn't too sure what it was, but I later learned. And we redid the inside. We didn't get to the point of painting the inside, but some of the guys were painting the outside of this building, and knew that even after a clean coat of new paint, it wouldn't take long before graffiti was covering that building. So at the top of the side of the building, Dick Bodenhammer and Joe Godfrey and Lynn Smith and some of the others decided to paint the word graffiti on the side and then drew an arrow around to point to the door. We didn't know at the time that the center would then become known as the Graffiti Center and ultimately the Graffiti Church. We've had the opportunity to have many reunions, several of them in New York City. One of them, I think most recent one, was here on campus. Just great folks. We've hung together through thick and thin and celebrate everybody's birthday every year via email. But yeah, graffiti means a lot to me.
When you were at Cumberland as a student, you met a guy that became of significance to you, a guy named Bowdre, who would be actually a target for a good future for the good convocation, because he's a very accomplished attorney and a wonderful person of ethics here in the Birmingham community. But tell us about how you and Burts met.
Actually, I was still an undergraduate when we met.
I was confused. I thought you were already a law school student.
No, he likes to say that I followed him to law school, but that was not the case. He just happened to have been there ahead of me. But we met my last semester as an undergraduate and his first semester as a law student in the cafeteria. He likes to say that I sought him out and asked him out, but that is not the truth. He was having lunch with a friend of mine, and he was not sitting there when I went to sit down next to Wayne and talk to Wayne. He then came and Wayne introduced me, and eventually we ended up negotiating a date. So, he became one of my best friends almost immediately. He is a great friend to so many people. And eventually we fell in love, and the rest is history.
Burts is one of the best listeners that I've ever encountered. He just, when you're talking with him, you just feel that he's absorbing everything that you're saying.
He does. He's a great, he lets me rant on and on for a while before he responds too.
Yeah.
So
well, good for him.
So yeah, it's good.
You have had an amazing career by any estimation. And just so our students can know the depth and breadth of that, go ahead and do a little resume stuff for us about what you've done in your professional career.
Well, after graduating from Cumberland and getting married in the process, I had the great opportunity to clerk for a federal judge, Judge Foy Ewan, and I learned so much from him about how it is to be a fair and impartial judge, and yet to also care about the people who come in front of you. And I remember thinking when I was clerking for him, he's got the best job in the world. Wouldn't it be great to be a federal district court judge? And then I promptly forgot about that. I had the opportunity while clerking with him to then take a job with a firm that was then known as Reeves and Peterson. It's gone through several iterations and is most closely related to the Christian and Small firm now. I was very interested in litigation, and they gave me an opportunity to litigate. There were not a lot of women at the time that were in litigation. It seemed like more women would go into corporate work or estate planning, but I really felt that I wanted to litigate, and I had the great opportunity to do that. A wonderful experience. Some pretty big cases and some pretty interesting ones came my way while I was at that firm. Then after my first child was born, I decided I didn't want to be working 60 to 70 hours a week, so I went part-time with the firm and negotiated that, and they then made me partner while I was part-time, which was pretty unusual. But I had an unusual bunch of partners. They were really great people. After my second child was born, though, even a 40-hour work week got to be a lot, trying to juggle the children and have some time for my husband and for the rest of life. And so I started looking for other opportunities, and had talked with two good friends of mine at Cumberland about possibly coming on there in the legal writing program. And we were trying to finesse how we could get that to work. And unknown to them, one summer in August, right before school started, I got a call from Dean Parham Williams wanting to know if I would be willing to teach the insurance class as an adjunct professor. And I was thrilled with that, but I was looking to cut back, not to add to.
Right.
So Burt and I prayed a lot about it, felt like it was God opening a window for me, and I accepted that position for one class, and I think it was maybe $1,000, maybe $1,500 for that one class. But I came back from our vacation at the beach and told my senior partner that I wanted to go of counsel with the firm so I could teach, and he thought I was totally crazy. Just didn't make sense to resign from the partnership to teach one class. But by December, I had been offered the position as Director of Legal Research and Writing to begin the following year. And I talked Dean Williams.
For $2,000 instead of $1,500.
Something about like that,
right,
yeah. But I did talk Dean Williams into letting me teach a class the spring semester, so I could still be of counsel at the firm and working at the school, and then started teaching. And loved it. I really felt like God had opened a big door for me, and that I was finally really on the mission field to which I felt He had called me many, many years earlier. I loved pouring my life into the students and working with them through issues that they would have. Was very involved with the Christian Legal Society, and we had some great times taking students to conferences and other things. And then after about 11 years, a new door opened.
A big door.
Yes. After the 2000 election was finally settled, fortunately more peacefully than the most recent election.
That was the hanging Chad election.
Yes,
right?
the hanging Chad election. And I got a call from Senator Shelby wanting to know if I might be interested in becoming a federal district court judge. I really didn't think that that would work out. I had too much religious stuff on my resume. I had co-authored a brief that dealt with some religious free exercise issues that wasn't too sure if anybody would really like that, and close affiliation with the Christian Legal Society that's known for being pro-life. But Burt and I prayed about it. We talked with the family about it and decided God may be opening another window or door. And so I prayed, and if this is not what I should be doing, dear God, please close the door. And there were no closed doors. There was the 9/11 events that slowed things down, and we actually had the judiciary hearing in the Capitol because the Senate office buildings were closed because of the anthrax scare back then. And so there's some little bumps in the road, but eventually the Senate confirmed me, and I got my commission and began work in November of 2001 as a federal district judge.
I should know this, but I don't. How harsh was your confirmation process?
It was really pretty easy for me.
By way of comparison with today's standards, perhaps.
And district judges generally don't get the grilling that the circuit judges do,
Yeah.
and certainly not the grilling that Supreme Court justices get.
Yeah.
There were 6 of us who went through the judiciary hearing together. All 6 of us were supposed to be non-controversial, but the day before our hearing, when we arrived, we found out that the Fifth Circuit nominee was going to be more controversial. So most of the questions were directed to him and very few to the district judges. And usually they were relatively softball questions. So
Yeah. You don't wish ill for anybody else, but at the same time, if somebody's taking the heat, you don't argue about it, right?
Right.
Okay. Just in a real nutshell, give us 30 seconds on what a judge does. What does a federal judge do?
Okay. Federal judge in 30 seconds. Okay.
45. Go ahead.
Our job is to apply the law to the facts that are presented to us. In a jury trial, of course, though, the jury determines what the facts are. The judge instructs the jury on the law. But a lot of cases are handled through summary judgment, which is a motion process and briefing process, and so a lot of cases are decided on whether there are any genuine issues of fact for a jury to determine, and if not, then the judge writes an opinion explaining how the law applies to that particular case.
And remind us again of any appeal process beyond whatever you hear.
Oh, yeah. I'm definitely not the last word. Any cases that a party really wants to take further goes to the 11th Circuit. And the 11th Circuit then tells me whether I was right or wrong. And sometimes they are appealed to the Supreme Court. Most of the time the Supreme Court doesn't grant certiorari because the Supreme Court doesn't have to hear cases if it doesn't want. And so for the most part, the 11th Circuit is the deciding court for cases that I first decide.
Well, I can say this because I know it's true. You're known among your colleagues for excruciating fairness. That is a hallmark of yours. I know that you are also concerned about potential injustice in the system. And I wonder if you might be willing to talk with us about a case or two that might help the rest of us to learn a little bit more about potential injustices.
One thing that has bothered me for many, many years was being told by a circuit court judge that I needed to remember that I was in a court of law, not a court of justice. And there have been several times, and I won't bore you with many of them, where I really felt injustice was being done and there was very little I could do about it. Particularly in the criminal justice area. One case that I handled more than 6 years ago that still bothers me involves a 22-year-old, very immature young man who was prosecuted because he had on his old cell phone 4 pictures of his former 17-year-old girlfriend. The pictures qualified as child pornography, and he was prosecuted for having those 4 pictures. Now, most of the time when I have a child pornography case in front of me, there are literally thousands of images for which a person is prosecuted. But I argued with the prosecutor, but the prosecutor has the right to prosecute as she sees fit, and there was nothing that I could do. The young man admitted to possessing child pornography. There was no doubt that he had the child pornography. And my job was to sentence him. Under the sentencing guidelines, he should have gone away for, I think it was 4 or 5 years, and I just was not going to send this young man to prison. for basically sexting with his former girlfriend. And as an aside, legally, they could have had sex with each other and he would not have been prosecuted because she was over the age of consent. So I just felt like that was unfair. But I imposed a sentence of probation, and during that time period, he could not have a computer. He could not live in his parents' house because it was too close to a school. He couldn't have any job or do anything that put him anywhere in contact with children. So about the only job he could get was bartending. There weren't going to be any children there. He had a rough time of it and finally finished probation this past year. But his punishment is not over. Under Alabama law, he will have to register for the rest of his life as a sex offender. He will never be able to have a job or do any volunteer work or even go to church where he can come in contact with children. He's decided that although he would love to be a father, he will not be because he won't be able to go to any of his children's school activities. Alabama has the harshest sex offender laws, and as of right now, there is nothing that this young man can do to absolve himself of having to register the rest of his life. Punishment should meet the crime, and I think that this continued punishment that he faces is far out of line with his poor choice of a girlfriend.
You picked an excellent case for discussion on that, and Judge Bowdre, I hope in the years ahead that you will continue to speak and write about this, because these are stories that need to be heard and understood. For most of us, balancing our personal and professional lives, that tends to pose perhaps one of the greatest challenges for us, because the more involved that you get with your career, and especially if you have a family, making all of that work is sometimes very difficult. And our listeners can easily comprehend the complexity of your life and Burt's life during these years. What's a lesson or two that you've learned that you can help the rest of us learn to do a better job?
Well, first I learned that the analogy really isn't balancing, because balancing sort of is like you got two things going on, and most of us have more than two things. So it's more like juggling. And I heard the analogy made many years ago, and it stuck with me, that when you're juggling, you've got some glass balls and you've got some rubber balls, and you've got to know which is which. Yeah. You can't let the glass balls drop. Yeah. The rubber balls may bounce and won't break, but it also, we would always think that, well, family and our relationship with Christ are the glass balls, and they are, but there's sometimes in a professional life where the family ball may have to morph into a rubber ball, or you might have to pass it off to your spouse to catch from time to time because of the demands of, for example, a client who may have a deadline that's got to be met, and you've got to do what you have to do to get that done, or the time commitment involved in a major trial or other things. So it's good to have a good partner who can catch those glass balls for you.
Yes, it's true. It is. I affirmed that in my own case as well. Judge, we're running out of time. I've got just one more question for you, and I don't think that it's been mentioned in this context so far. You're also a Samford trustee. In addition to all of these other things and your interests, you have served now on our Board of Trustees with great distinction for many years. You're also a person of great wisdom and integrity and faith. With that as kind of the background statement, talk with us then about what your hopes are for Samford and for our students and employees.
My hope for Samford is that it will continue to grow in relationship with God and in demonstrating to the world the importance of that relationship with Christ, that we will turn out students who go into all the corners of the world demonstrating through their lives their faith in Jesus Christ. And I wish that for all of our faculty members and for our staff as well, that not just the students, but everybody associated with Samford reflects that love of God for others, and that we extend grace as Christ has extended grace to us.
Well said, and I share your hope for all of that. Samford, thanks for joining us today, and I hope you have a good remainder of the week.